do another, just like yesterday. We're going to let you all start by placing us a master test here. We're going to have a land. We want the 2 blinds or 1?
Okay, we'll do 2.
Okay, we're going to have a land test, walk up, double blind. So pair up and set us up some tests, and let's see what we come up with.
Ellen, can they honor at any point today?
We honored here actually, so yeah, we'll honor this as well.
Where's Craig?
The middle one or the middle one and the right? Right at the base of them. Yeah. So to the left. Yeah. Left to right, and then under the arc out there. Oh, you're saying that. What do you think
So, some of the concepts and things that y'all were talking about is what we had. We use the hay bale as a walk up. Again, the walk up's supposed to be what? Is that more than 45 yards?
45, yeah.
So instead of throwing the hay bale from the hay bale left to right, we threw it right to left back to the middle shrub there, middle bushy tree. Angle back. Our second bird comes from the bigger clump of trees and actually lands directly in front of the other clump of trees. You get a picture, and the dogs have a choice there. They probably don't want to run headlong into a clump of trees. Dogs are going to probably think we've got to go left or right in that situation. And our go bird was back over here from the hay bale, thrown right with a sharp angle back just to the edge of the cover.
So left.
Yes.
Right to left. Oh,
Right
to left.
left with a pretty good angle back to get to the edge of the cover. Not deep in the cover, but just on the edge. Again, the thought process there is the dogs tend to want to either hunt back in the cover or short of the cover. They don't necessarily like to look just along the edge of the cover. And I think we saw that with our dogs out here Friday. 2 blinds. One under the arc of the walk-up bird. The slot, as everyone's calling it, except through the first and second. Oh,
Tiny.
the tiny slot back to the far tree line. And
far tree line.
the big clump where the mark is coming out of.
The closest.
The closest far tree
There's
line.
another tree line there, and then there's one just a little further back.
No,
So.
this is not field trials.
And our other one is on the edge of this clump of trees over here, about halfway back on the edge again, right against the cover.
Okay.
Questions? Okay.
This is where
No Tuesday, I mean around it already.
she went around that corner.
Around that one a time or two.
And then that one at least
This one 3 times, then reversed the field and went the other way.
Yeah, well, if she didn't find it this way, she's got to find it this way. Right?
So, all right, let's set that up and run a few pup-pups. Yield.
she?
This year. Alabama. They ever heard of that kind of stuff?
Bad form.
My cousin from Alabama.
I was in her flight at Master National.
Here.
She does the like PA sing about the dog stuff. She had like theme song for the dog. She just probably after every two or three dog, she wants to PA go, roll tide. Me too. Yep.
Pearl. Girl. Here. Come here. Fetch it up. Here. Here. Yo. single?
I know, yeah. 1, 2, 3. Count the 3.
Okay, guns up. This will be a triple. Triple.
Heel. Sit. Sit.
I think we're ready.
What? Underdog?
Ready.
Here, watch. Heel. Heel. Here.
Forward. Good boy, good. Come on, here. Come on, forward. Good boy, good. Here. 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 Sit. 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 Good dog, good boy. Well, that's a solid 6 in my book.
Let it go on, sit.
Yeah. Here. Yeah. Easy and dog. Sometimes it's way out, you know. Here. Here. Heel. Heel. Sit. Sit. Huh? Heel. He's next. There, dog. Forward. Good dog, Corb. Good boy. Come on, here. Okay, good dog. Good. Good boy. Up.
For your back? I can do that.
Up. Here, 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 here. Okay. I will take it over. Here. Sit. Up. Good. Good, Roy. Up. 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 Over. No. Yeah, I winded it. Come on, here. Come on, Clark, Harry. Here. Come on. Come on, let's go. Hurry, hurry. Hurry, hurry, hurry. Here. 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 Here.
I can go get one if you have it.
Sit. Up. You're all right, good dog. Up. No. Up. Good, good dog.
So I guess what does the group have any comments about this series we ran and what you guys saw?
It looks like the marks were okay. The blinds were. So there was a lot of section in the middle of the for the blinds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
When this was originally set up, it had a wind directly at our back, behind us. It did not give that right-hand bird away at all. So your dog really had to dig it out and mark it. And that'd be one thing I would certainly want to consider when setting this up. Would be, maybe not allow the wind to give that bird away.
Yeah. Whenever you get a weather change like this, you got this kind of gusty wind. It's a good time to run your dog because there's a ton of scent blowing all around, pretty varied. Ideally, you just got to when you go to run a test, you just got to do what the club's resources would allow you to do. But ideally, you'd want to throw that bird longer. You get it in front of those trees over there, and of course, the wind. When the dogs did want to run up the gap, the wind gave the bird away. That's okay. That happens. That's kind of like the principle of that one. This left bird we threw out here, like normally if you were training and you had the resources or it was a test, that'd be a really good place for a flyer because your fall area can be pretty liberal. You don't have to drop it in a teacup. I think normally would be a flyer. Or if you're training, it could be a simulated flyer. Put a guy out there with a shotgun.
Would you have put the flyer so that it lands in that heavy cover?
Yeah, but if you shot one and it landed short, I think that'd be okay.
Okay.
Actually, I think shooting flyers in a heavy cover is good for dogs because when they hit it, they got so much scent in there, they tend to make them stick in there and dig it out. Dogs over time, I think, they learn to pick up flyers because, just from doing it multiple times, they learn some scent discrimination between, just the general scent in the area and the actual scent of a bird. You'll notice when you run young dogs, especially like junior dogs on flyers, they have a hard time finding birds in that area. In that area. You notice older dogs will go to that area and they'll drill right in on the flyer. I think they just get good at it. This middle bird we threw, I think it was a really good walk-up, but you'd almost need like a really good bird boy to drop it right in the same place every day or every time, especially in a windy day like that. When you were able to drop it, right next to the middle bush, it made the mark hard because the dogs have a tendency to just want to run up the big hill. And of course, if the wind wouldn't have been blowing so hard, right to left, if they'd have ran past it, they might have step back over. That's a pretty good mark because they really got to think about it. And they got to run towards the bush like that. And typically, they don't like to do that. Like I said, the gap bird, bridge bird, some people call them. This is a really classic way to throw a mark. It's hard for a dog because they'll look out there and they see that gap they can run up to. You want to run up to it, run through it. And also you got, both the terrain and the wind today going to make those dogs, fade down the terrain, and the wind wanted to push them a little bit more. And that you saw quite a few dogs fade down into there. So that was a factor to consider for that bird. As far as the right-hand blind goes, there's a whole bunch that's going on down in there. That might have actually been a little bit over the top busy, for a test. It was a really good training bird. It was not only hard to get that initial line to get them to go through the smallest of those two gaps, more likely to look out there, and it's hard to tell exactly where they're looking, but they're much more likely to look out there and want to go through the left gap than that narrow gap. They did get through the gap. They had they just picked up a bird right there. Of course, they ran through that bird's nest. When they did get through the gap, they had that gun station out there to look at, and that bird that they previously picked up over here. But it was pretty tough to go to exactly where that blind was. And that blind today had a pretty good wind guard on it, because you had to get left of the blind to win the bird, and the dogs didn't tend to want to go left. They wanted to go right because of all the other things that happened out there. And both those blinds, when most of the time when you run dogs, it's on an area that's kind of manicured for dogs, cut for dogs. And when they do that, you've got a really, really hard, unnatural cover edge, and it's hard to drive dogs into them. But you see that a lot on a test, So you got to really work more or less in your yard work on being able to stop your dog at the end of the blind and control him and get a cast where he'll get into those weeds a few feet. Because what they do is, they naturally want to flare off of that. And on the left-hand blind, you had the pitfall. It was really easy to lose the dog. He'd run into those woods, and you had that old fall he just picked up, so they had a tendency to want to go there. And the wind was also, when you're running that blind, also, dogs don't like to run into the wind. They like to fade with the wind. So they'd run down there and fall off the slope a little bit, fade with the wind. Remember that old fall. So those are all factors on that blind. You had to fight. That was basically what I saw about the test and stuff you'd want to train on. If Alan saw anything else.
I saw, mostly the same thing. Particularly this the right-hand blind. You just need to work on training your dogs to run into some cover or run into an edge like that. Again, today that dogs just did not want to cast to that edge of that cover, and that's something you need to train on. That's one thing I typically will always do that. I rarely run blinds that are just out in the middle of a field if I can. They'll always be ended up into a cover or a hay bale. And you can do the same thing with a tree. If we'd have put a blind here at the front of this tree right down here, the dogs running straight at that, they're going to flare one way or the other. They don't want to just run into that cover and into that tree. So you always want to, do that in training, because those are the kind of factors you're going to find, particularly as you move into master blind work. You're not going to get as many blinds just out in the middle of the field. And again, I think you saw the, ideally we wanted this right-hand mark to land right in front of that line of trees. And if the wind had not given that bird away when it went left, you would have seen a lot of dogs punch that gap and just kept on rolling. And it would have been hard for them to get back to that on their own. And it would have been hard to even handle them back to it. Again, you had that same thing, running into a wall, and they're going to flare and move away from it. So those are the kinds of things you want to me, the bird placement on this, that's what you were looking at. And wanting to probably try to, simulate and go forward with in the future. I guess this would be a point for questions.
Well, it's interesting to watch the dogs on this one, this right-hand blind, because a lot of them obviously wanted to cut in, and then if we kept giving overs or, angle back, then they would take the trails of the mode, and then they would go hightailing back. They were told not to cut in, don't cut in, don't cut in. So that was pretty interesting, at the far end of that little cover line.
Yeah, another really classic place for a blind like that at a master test would be that little indention right in the middle of those trees.
Mm-hmm.
Put it about 5 yards deep in there. That would have been another a hard place to get your dog to go.
Mm-hmm.
Right on the corner of that tree line, it promotes them. You casting them that way, directing them that way, promotes them to want to run flat out there.
Any other thoughts? Or?
I had a question about yesterday's second series, which what did it have? It had a flyer and two other birds and then the Persian, two blinds. Because it took time, and I know time management. What would you have taken out? What would you have done differently to shorten up the time? Take out things, shorten it up. I mean, it's pretty meaty.
Yeah, probably with that, through that diversion, that, what do you want to call it, that poison diversion bird, and I think we'd have probably, only ran one blind.
One of the blinds would have come out for me
Okay.
to sped it up a little bit, but I wouldn't have wanted to change the marks very much
I
at
was
all.
going to say there wasn't a lot of swimming. So
No, we kept swimming to a minimum, and those your left and your center bird were pretty meaty, and I would have not wanted to give those up.
Okay.
And for safety, I wouldn't have wanted the flyer anyplace else really.
Well, speaking of yesterday, Matt, when you were talking about doing the middle blind and giving a 45-degree angle off, so just to explain or have a little bit more conversation, so you're saying teach the 45-degree angle off the point because then the blind was on the second point, they're going to curl, most likely to go instead of trying to give a back either way, and then them go even more inland, which then got a couple of them in trouble because then they didn't want to go the curved line.
Yeah, for training stuff like that, a 45 or a 60 is what you want on a point like that. Really nice. That's casting, just be a quick stop and straight up back in the water.
Mm-hmm.
Another good way to train that, a little bit tricky to test, another good way to train that would be to put some decoys on the other side of that point where they don't see them until they're up on the point.
Mm-hmm.
Some suction. Yeah. But yeah, I think just about all the time in training, when you're training, you're not necessarily running a blind, you're trying to train.
Mm-hmm.
So just about all the time in training, if I get my dog up on a point on a blind, I'm going to give him something like a 45 or a 60 off that point, so he's out in the water where I can see him.
I think every dog you saw that handlers gave a straight back, cast them off of that, those dogs would automatically, all of them would hook back, and that's, you're going to see that even with some really seasoned dogs. I see that a lot when I judge and set something like that up. So you want to get those dogs off of there at an angle you can then work with them, because once they hit their head, they're going to stay there. It's really hard to get them off.
Same thing with this crosswind we got going on out here today. You might go out and train and not do any of this other stuff. Just put a blind out there that's crosswind and work on running that. Getting that. Because dogs, they hate to cast into the wind.
Now, I get pretty excited when I go to train. If I can get a good wind like this, I'll do a lot of crosswind stuff. Normally you would think about running with it at your back, but I like to run crosswind for training if I can do it.
Can you talk about judging, particularly like the keyhole blind? I saw a couple dogs where people really tried to get the slot, brought their dogs back and pushed them through. Other people just let them kind of go around and didn't really try to force the issue. How do you judge that?
Well,
What are you looking for?
I think, if you just went slightly to the left of that little bush, you made a pretty good effort. you know, you're still well with, for a hunt test type scenario, you're still well within the corridor, you know, and if you finish the, you know, it puts you at a little bit disadvantage because you're not going to see the dog very much after he goes past it, you know, but I think if you finish the blind pretty well after that, it certainly would be a passing blind. I wouldn't, if I was running in the hunt test, I wouldn't get into a, you know, a titanic battle with the dog trying to drive it through that slot. That's probably not going to end well.
Well, and the fall was there for a couple of them, so a lot of them didn't want to go back in there, so they were fighting getting in there as well. You could see.
Right. That's a really good training scenario or blind, I think. But like I said, it might have been a little bit much for setting up at a hunt test.
As far as when I judge something like this, I find most handlers put their dogs out trying too hard to put their dog through the slot. And I'm like, Matt, if your dog, you know, working with you and you just barely skirt the outside of that slot, really either way, I can live with that. As long as your dog continues to work with you on through there. Now I want to see you try to make somewhat of an effort to put them there to start with, but you know, again, don't get into a battle that you're going to lose. You know, there'll be some judges that'll, you know, will drop you because you didn't go through their slot, but to me, those are probably less experienced judges. You know, to me, is your dog working with you, and are you trying to run the blind the way that it's supposed to be?
You know, another version of that, whether or not it would be a walk-up, whether you had dropped that mark in that far left-hand slot, you know, and that was the old fall, then you'd be more justified to try to get the dog through the middle.
Again, remember now, your dog gets back to an old fall on the way to a blind. That's not a good place to be. So you want to be careful about that.
With this particular setup, is there a better order to run the two blinds in? If the judges don't tell you, you have to run one first?
Which bird did you pick up? Which mark did you pick up last?
I guess give all the scenarios, right?
You know, if you pick up the two outside birds and you get your walk-up bird second or third, I might have a tendency that I want to go run the outside right bird. And if I ran the right bird last, my tendency might be to go get the slot blinds first.
Because you don't know your dog. I mean, if you think you'll have an easier time picking that one off the corner of the tree line over there, you know, I'd probably get the one I thought I could get easier first. Because if you do, you know, it's just like, you know, most dogs, you know, they only got so much handling in them. You know, and if you have a tussle getting the middle bird, it's going to be a lot harder to get the one off the other side.
Good questions. Any others?
I have another question. It happened at a hunt test, and it was back on where we were with Series 2. And a question of what the dog normally do. It was where the fire station was, but it was left to right. This was the bird, wasn't the fire. There was a mowed strip parallel to this section, and the bird was put in the cover just before the mowed strip. And it's like all the dogs just flew past the mowed strip, and they couldn't get them back into the cover pit.
Yeah, I mean, that's just kind of that picture over there is kind of like one of those big sky pictures, you know. Dog kind of takes a snapshot of it and he runs off into it. You know, we saw some dogs run over in the cornfield and all that stuff. It's hard to get dogs to do that.
Yeah, I mean, they also wanted to be used, you know. I walked out there and said, what evident when you walked out, it was cover when the bird landed and then this boat strip. And once they got into the strip, they wouldn't come back.
If, again, it goes back to bird placement, but if there's a piece of cover out in a mowed field like this that you can throw a mark into, that's a good training thing, because dogs are going to run round and round and round that. They've got to figure out, eventually they have to go into that cover to come up with it. I've judged a lot of tests where, a bird put into a little bit of cover is the hardest bird for the dogs to ever come up with. And, if they get through the cover to a mowed strip like that, they're going to hunt that mowed strip always, because that's easy. They've just got to, again, it goes back to training. And that's sort of what I think this workshop's about is, where do you put those kind of birds so you can train on that stuff at home. So cover is the place to throw a mark when you get that opportunity.
Okay, I have a question. So like, it kind of goes back to that, when we talked about throwing a bird into that heavy cover back there. And I've been told that if you can't see the dog, how can you judge the dog? And my thought on that is, if you're hunting, that would happen. Would happen. You would expect that dog to go into that cover and hunt it up and bring it back. So talk to me on that, because you've got this other one that says no, because you got to be able to see that dog.
Just for me, I think where we had that bird landing, you can pretty much see your dog the whole time if it was in the area of the fall, particularly on a go bird. A smaller area of the fall, you should be working. So, when your dog does get out of sight and deep in this, then they're out of the area of the fall. And I would be judging it accordingly. Now, the area of the fall gets bigger for every bird that they go to. But for me, at least, I don't know about Matt, but to me, you should be able to pretty much your dog should have pretty much stayed inside on that bird.
Right, unless you got a runner. But yeah, okay.
I most definitely think I want to be able to see the dog.
Yeah, okay.
Maybe if we were sitting here and we just decide, we definitely want to shoot a flyer over there, or if it was okay with the landowner, maybe take like a ranger out there and knock some grass down a little bit.
Okay.
So you can see the dogs.
Right.
Because you can't be super particular about where the flyer falls.
Exactly.
There's some variation.
And again, you got to take into consideration, I think we had that one really light bird and a gust of wind, and it shoved it on back there a little bit. So again, as a judge, you just have to sit there and take some things into consideration as it's going on. But again, mostly judges don't want to see dogs or not be able to see dogs.
Right.
And if they've set up a reasonable mark, you should have an area of the fall that's the dog is visible.
Yeah, I mean, this happened years ago, and it was when one of these pieces of property where you couldn't do this, and everything was high, and so it probably was more the fact that that's kind of what they were dealt, the card they were dealt.
I ran a test about a week and a half ago under a really tough judge that we ran in a lot of cover, and but every area of the fall, you could see the dogs working. Now, they may have been out of sight a little bit getting to and from, but when they got there, you could see the dogs working. And Matt happened to be that judge. And so, it's just one series. But, in his defense, we didn't have much choice. The grass was just tall and there hadn't been much cut.
Right.
So,
when you throw a mark for your dog, I think it's important that the dog really has a good look at the mark.
Mm-hmm.
I don't like birds that are, throwing against a hard, shadowy, a long bird throwing against a hard, shadowy tree line, and stuff like that. I want to, how can you judge marking if the dog didn't have a reasonable opportunity to see the majority of the fall? I think it's fair game as long as the dog gets a good picture of the fall. A nice, pretty well-thrown bird, and it falls into some adversity. I think that's fair, And this bird, out here, we didn't throw it very far in the cover, but
Right.
even if you threw it a little bit farther, and the dog went busting out there, and the next time you saw him, he was swimming out there in the pond. Well, he's out of the area.
Right.
I mean, he didn't mark the bird very
Right.
well.
How much on that mark right there? How much of your area of fall would you increase the area of the fall if you're shooting a flyer versus just planting bird out there?
Oh.
Because of all the scent and the feathers going that way, it's going to go
It would
deep.
be a much larger area of the fall.
Like twice the size, 3 times the size.
2-3 times for me.
Back further towards the wind. Obviously, if they're way over here, they're out of the area, but deeper into the cover, probably, right?
Yes.
Well, if the wind was blowing like it was this windy. If it was, I don't mind throwing a flyer when it's this windy, and I always try to throw it, with the wind. But I probably wouldn't want to throw that flyer. It'd being this windy and wind going in that direction down towards the pond.
Because the whole back side of that area would be full of scent.
It's probably full of scent anyway from the geese.
So,
True.
But you're right about flyers. If you think about there's scent and duck particles everywhere from the point that they shot the bird till it lands and wherever the wind pushes it. So that scent area for a flyer, you sit there watching when they shoot a flyer and they get a puff, but that scent area is good.
So after seeing all of our dogs, what should we all be working on? Go back to step 1.
Basics. Take up goal. Get a new
You
dog.
should always, no matter what level you think your dog is at, I think you should always be working at, sharpening the saw, so to speak. I think you should always be working on your basics. Make sure you can block and tackle, because then you can run pretty much what people throw at you. You want to go out and, you don't necessarily want to go out and train way above your dog's level every day. You want to just kind of push that edge, make them successful, make them learn.
And run singles. Train with singles. 80 to 90% of the marks your dog sees should be singles. I've got a pretty good master dog that 90% of the marks he sees 5 days a week are singles. And you can incorporate things into those singles that add to the hardness, cover, terrain, all those things the wind, all the things we've been sort of talking about this weekend, incorporate them into those marks and make them a little tougher along as the dog accomplishes one thing, then it's time to take them on. Don't come out and try to do the hardest thing first and get into, your dog's going to get confused and struggle some. But teach your dog these things. Like this, the land water series, the second series we did yesterday, where we had the dogs go on the point, off the point, back up on land. If your dogs are having trouble with that, go teach it. Go over on the first point and teach the mark from there, and then come back to this side and teach it again, where they've already learned about that first piece of water. Then you add the second piece, and when you just want to teach it in increments, where the dog gets comfortable and sort of understands what you're wanting. A lot of times I think we take dogs to the line and we try to do stuff with them that they've not seen, and they have no clue what we're trying to do with them. And they have to have that picture as well. So to me, that's what I would encourage is basics, but teach things in those singles. And you know, occasionally you've got to run doubles and triples so your dogs understand that. But no, I remember the first dog that I trained. You know, he never saw a single. We went out and we'd throw triples and quads, and I'd make it as hard as I could, and he wasn't as successful as he should have been. So I had to learn as well.
You got to remember on these two blinds, they were hard blinds, but all the tools you need to be able to run them are basic stuff. You know, you get in the yard, you know, taking a good initial line, being able to stop them on the end of it, you know, this pile work, being able to stop them on the end of a blind and control them, you know, them not them not getting crazy on the end of the blind, you know, casting into the wind, pretty basic skill. You got to find a day like this to do it, and run casting into the wind. You can do that both on blinds and marks. You know, you throw a mark into the wind, you run it, and the dog tends to fade on the wind. You know, you cast them in the wind. Eventually, they develop a skill of not fading with the wind. You know, casting into the wind. You just got to do that through attrition. You know, and work on it. They're pretty smart. They pick it out.
One of the things I saw was the young dog. I saw it was a cage dog, and I kept them outside. They can do blinds, but when they get beyond a certain distance, I it's obviously I've trained her up close, but I haven't put her way out.
I run a lot of blinds that are way longer than untested blinds. When I train with myself, you know, you can't. I don't want hot blinds always sitting in mixed in with my marks. So my blinds tend to be way deeper than my marks anyway. But yeah, I think you want to run longer.
I mean, that's what these that I.
Longer, harder blinds, you know, it makes the hunt test blinds pretty easy.
How long were the pattern blinds that you taught?
Well, because I had to walk out to them. You probably saw about where, I mean, she runs long, and then when I stopped her, I thought she was going to get the first one. And then it, like, went to hell. Because she was beyond where we normally play.
I'm like Matt. Typically, I don't run training blinds that are much under 175, 200 yards on my. I just want them to run. I figure if I can teach them to run 150, 200 yards in training, you get to a hunt test and a 100-yard blind shouldn't spook them out too much.
But it's the stopping and then going on the stopping.
Which goes back to pattern blinds, teaching them to do those. You know, T, double T, teaching, making, stretching those things out. The dog just, again, they get to a comfort zone, and once they're past that, they get squirrely.
You'll notice when you're bringing up a young dog, you get him, you know, where he can run a pretty decent blind. You know, he can run a pretty decent 75-yard blind, and you try to push him a little bit farther, you get him up to 125, and all of a sudden you can't get him to take a back. He just keeps going back and forth. You just got to, they're all like that. You just got to kind of work into it. Sometimes when they first start doing that, you know, walk out on them a little bit. That's a pretty good technique for running a long blind. You know, you send the dog and just start walking. So, you know, every time you stop and you're a little bit closer, then you stop doing that, then he gets the idea. They need to get the idea that it's just go farther and do the same thing.
Anything else?
What are your thoughts on putting marks watermarks right at the edge of the water? For whatever reason, we see that occasionally, and we don't really. I mean, it's kind of going against what the dogs are always taught is, you know, to stop. Yeah, you still have to get in, but they're either like the high chargers, they'll leap right over the top of it, or they'll swim right past it looking for the bird when it's right at the edge. What do you feel about those types of marks?
Yeah, I hardly ever train one of those marks in training. I want the dogs when they get to the edge of water to drive
Right,
up.
you want them to drive through it, yeah.
The edge of the water is usually hot from
Mm-hmm.
native things being around there, and you know their natural tendency for a young dog. You get a brand new dog out, start running water marks with it. They get to that edge, they want to hunt that edge. You know, so I don't typically put marks there. You do see that in hunt tests occasionally, and you know if you run HRC hunt tests, you see it a lot. They do it a lot. So you just got to work on the dogs to develop that skill. Maybe occasionally throw some. You sure don't want to throw it a majority of the time because they'll always hunt the bank.
Right.
You want them to drive out of the bank. And if it's a pretty fair mark, you know, a lot of times they throw it in right on the edge of the water where there's some vegetation, you know. Sometimes they'll get a splash there. You know. Maybe when you do throw one of those in training, throw it so the dog's got the wind advantage, you know, so it gets there, gets it up, he learns it, and sometimes they do pick up marks at the back. I don't default to mine, but I don't throw very many marks in the water either, because, you know, it's just hard on ducks. You know?
Yeah.
And if I do it, I usually do it with a ATV or a Delton or something. You know, they need to be able to, especially, you know, the ducks you find at a hunt test aren't like the ones that just flew down from Saskatchewan, you know.
You need to hold up.
So they do need to be able to find kind of a yucky duck in the water.
Yeah.
You gotta throw that every now and then.
You got to be able to go find that Sunday junior duck.
Yeah.
That's what those
Sunday junior ducks. We were fortunate to be on land today, not water.
I heard the other I'm judging. I heard the other I don't like to see that. I think it's a disadvantage to kind of unfair. Pretty unfair to the dog. Throw a duck in the water, need to have some really good duck. Float up like a duck does in the water.
So that being said, when you're setting up a hunt test, you typically run water first, and then run land, like we did in our own training scenario. Run land first and say water.
That's just something. Well, today we got to run water first if somebody else uses land, or we got to flop or something like that. Always going to shoot a flyer first year. So almost always going to run land doesn't mean you can't get a little bit of water.
A lot of times I'll start with the land water. Get some answers, some dogs, and then I'll move back to the land pretty quick. To me, it sort of speeds things up a bit. Personal preference.
My favorite thing to do is to throw a nice triple with an honor in the first. That's all. Like no judge, if he wants to run blind with it, you know, that's set on that. That's my favorite thing.
So then aren't you potentially carrying more? You don't have a blind to judge to see.
Not necessarily, not if you had a nice triple.
Not if you set some triples like you did this weekend.
Double handle.
And trust me, we did not set up the neatest stuff that we could have set up. We didn't get into any wipeout birds or inline birds and all of those things that, to me, certainly add a degree of difficulty to a set of marks. But you don't have to. Again, I think you saw that you can get the answers you're looking for without being tricky. You don't have to trick dogs. You just have to place birds, in good places.
Yeah, if you got to get up early in the morning to trick a dog, I don't like it when I go to a test and they're doing mom and pops and stuff like that. You go to a test and they do that, you just have to deal with it.
So if this were the setup that you had planned for today and the weather was like yesterday, how would you adjust this to the heat and everything from yesterday?
You have to take that into account. You know, one of those super hot days, especially up here when they're not used to it, or you folks aren't really typically used to it. You get to shorten something up. Take that into account. I think everybody knows that getting dogs in the water doesn't necessarily cool them off either. You gotta use your head. We're not trying to hurt any dogs. Where I'm from, down south, down in Alabama, they don't think anything of running on a 93 degree day.
If it was really hot like yesterday, I might not put that go bird in the cover, thinking that they're going to get in that cover. It's going to be even hotter. They can't breathe in there. And they're putting on a big hunt. They're sort of starting off hot on that first bird. So I might shorten that one up a little bit. Probably the big change I would make.
Definitely, this was yesterday. It was pretty. I think Friday when we were out here it was almost calm and hot. I probably would definitely put something like that in here. Kind of run the dogs through all that. I kind of advocate for that much.
Another topic that came up when I was running, you guys talked about rehealing or not rehealing. On my walk up, RJ got quite a bit ahead of me. And I walked to him to release them instead of rehealing him to release. It's training. I should have rehealed at a test. I definitely would have done what I did. And one said I think Matt, you said I wouldn't ask to reheal, right? Because you and the dog walked up how you walked up. That's the handler's responsibility.
It was a walk up. That's where the dog went. The dog sat. We shot the bird. I have a dog that doesn't like to walk the bird and when she does that, I don't do anything. I don't walk up to her.
Let her go.
Let her go. I want her to go get that go bird. Rehealing her or walking up to her.
I do the same, unless sometimes you'll get a judge that's going to tell you to reheal. I don't believe in much rehealing as a judge on a walk-up. Like he said, that's where that dog saw it, and that's where the dog's going to start from. And I was teasing you about walking up to the dog.
Mm-hmm.
There's no problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
That was marks going off, and your dog kept moving around, and you kept walking with your dog. That's a different story.
Right.
But
If you were running that walk up, and that dog did get the distance from you, we shot that walk up, and the dog sat. Then we shot another bird. He went 5 yards over here, and he shot another bird. He went 5 yards over there.
Mm-hmm.
I'd probably tell you to reheal. But
Yeah.
he more or less sat where he initially sat when we shot the walk up.
Now, just walking up and running from a given point, it's a little different.
Mm-hmm.
If your dog creeps out, then you can expect to be told to reheal. And my rule of thumb is usually with the gun barrel. If your dog is out past the end of your gun barrel, I'll ask you to reheal, because in my opinion, your dog's put himself in an unsafe position.
Yeah.
You don't see it a lot anymore, but a lot of times dogs used to play, or judges used to place a creep line out there. Dog Creek past African Ash to the Rehill.
Mm-hmm.
I guess if the two judges are really sticklers about that, they're probably still doing that.
And there's some judges out there today still that got a line out there that's, they call the creep line, and once your dog's over it, they said your dog is broke, which I don't subscribe to that, because break is not creep. Break is when your dog is gone. So, you know, there may be a point out there that's too far of your creep for that judge to pass you. But to me, that's not a break. That's just a egregious creep.
They have a sitting problem.
And every once in a while, you'll see a dog that you shoot a 444, and when you shoot the last bird down, he's 30 yards out there. He's broken, even though he sat down.
And again, we'll disagree on that one. I wouldn't say he broke, but I'd say he crept way too far, and he's out.
Way too far.
Either way, he's out.
He's out. It's just your terminology.
Hmm.
I'm sorry Carol couldn't have come, because she's a pretty crafty person too. Could have added a lot to it. Like her grandson got injured, she had to stay home. Pretty good person. You see her judging the test. She's a pretty good person to go run on it. She'll put on a good test.
I have a question. So when I was in South Carolina, we saw a lot of hand-thrown birds. So hand-thrown versus thrown from a winger. When would you do hand-thrown, if ever? And when would you use wingers?
Good question, Dustin.
You got really good bird boys. I prefer a hand thrown.
I do too. I prefer hand thrown, and if bird boys are good and can throw them where they can get them up and be seen, that's my preference. Typically go right into problems with wingers. Something's going to go wrong. But
Even though the throws typically aren't very long, or can some really launch them.
there's something wrong with
Heck yeah.
as good as a winger.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Better than a winger.
Better.
there's times, I remember one hunt test I was judging, and our bird tech showed up, and it was a cheerleading squad. Nothing wrong with cheerleaders, but they could not hand throw a bird for us like we needed. So that's the case. We had to use wingers. But most of the time, clubs we run there at home have bird techs that can chuck them.
Well, it's just like that winger down there. Depends on what side you pulled down first or where that bird was placing.
Right.
You pulled the left side down, the bird was out last. Pulled the right side down last, it was in the bushes.
You gotta mark that. Well, it doesn't ever balance. So try to get
It's only off 10 yards.
Can you discuss, I know we had this for a while, where birds were going up. At one point, that tree, for example, was a good example, but it had a lot of leaves on it. And you'd see the bird go up, you wouldn't really see it go down. Maybe you might see it go down. But it was like, well, if you saw it go up, the judges were like, well, then it's okay. As it falls. But it was, but it's very hidden, it seemed to me a little bit unfair for the dogs.
I don't mind that if this is the first half of the arc. I don't like it if this is the second half. We threw a bird like that in the first series, that left-hand bird. We didn't really see the first half of the arc until it appeared from outside that tree. I definitely want the dog to see the bird hitting the ground.
I want to see them definitely give them that downward arc so they can see where that bird, give them an idea where the mark is. If they don't see that, if they just see the upward, they have no clue really where that bird went.
Okay.
anything else? If not, I'll say I've thoroughly enjoyed this. I appreciate the invitation to come and do it. You know, if you ever do anything to help in the future, let us know.
Be awesome. Good time. Thanks for the